show you how to brine a pork shoulder, and we're going to make pulled pork. We're going to use an injector, just a really long needle, and we're going to go ahead and start getting that done. And then I'm going to use the pulled pork for other recipes down the line. So we're going to learn how to do it this way, and then we're going to create all the other recipes from that. One of the other things we're doing is that typically when you're using brining, an injection brining, most people will grill or smoke, slow grill, slow smoke the pork. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to do a braising method. I want it as tender as possible and as juicy as possible. So that's why we're doing all these extra steps. So the first thing is we're using pineapple juice, and we're going to put in apple juice. There's a cup of each of those things. We're going to mix in some brown sugar, and there we go, and salt, which is probably one of the most important parts of this because it's going to break down the connective tissues, and it's going to really make it tender. And then we're going to put in some Worcestershire sauce and soy sauce, a lot of ingredients in them. And honestly, you can kind of use a lot of different types of ingredients. It's really what kind of flavoring you want in the pork, because it's pretty neutral as far as flavor. We're going to put some hot sauce. We're using tapatio, so it's not too hot, but good and spicy. And then we're using a dried mustard. Then all we're going to do is mix this up, and we're going to put it on the fire, the burners, and we're going to let it cook and dissolve. But we also have to let it cool down first before we inject it for safety reasons. While we're waiting for the brine solution to get all nice and hot and everything gets incorporated nicely, we're going to go ahead and take off the fat. You can actually leave it in there if you'd like, but we don't really need that much fat in this dish. It's going to be tender by itself. It's going to be plenty of flavor, and we just don't need that much fat floating around in our pulled pork. So we're just going to go ahead and cut that off. It's not that hard to do. Just trim it off here. There we go. I think it might be enough. Get this chunk off here. Piece there. And just a little bit more. And that's it. And now we're going to wait for the solution that we're going to bring on, and it's going to have to chill down because we don't want to be bringing on a hot or a warm product into a cold pork. That's a recipe for bacteria, and we don't want that. So we're going to wait and get it chilled, and we'll see you in just a minute. Okay, now that we've cooled down our brine, we're going to go ahead and inject it into the pork. Get it out of the bag. We're going to put it right back in the bag a little bit later. So we're going to keep that here. And it's actually a pretty simple process. I got a fairly narrow, tall container, so won't have any problem getting the brine out. And then we're going to go about every inch or so and just go kind of slowly, otherwise it'll squirt all over the place. This particular needle has 4 different holes up and down the needle, so you make sure to get all the way through the meat. You don't have to move the needle around too much. And that's probably, there it is. Felt a little bit of resistance. Now I stopped, and I gotta let it work its way in. There you go. And if you just push it really hard, it's just gonna squirt right back out. So if you just kind of go slowly, there, let it work it around a little bit, and there you go. And we're gonna do this a few times, get as much of it in there as possible. And really, this is just kind of an extra step. Typically when I braise something, that's all you need to do. You don't need to actually put in a brine. You can just braise it straight off and just take really low temperature for a very long time, and it works pretty well. I'm trying something a little different this time. We're gonna, just to make sure it's extra juicy and extra flavor for this recipe that I'm working with. And we're just taking it an extra step. And as soon as we're done with it braising, we're going to see how moist this thing can be. And that's really it. We're gonna do this a few more times and then put it back in the bag. There you go. Put it back in the bag, and then we're gonna put it in the container, in the refrigerator, and we're gonna leave it overnight and let the brine do its magic before we do the braise tomorrow. Okay, talk to you then. We're ready to do our second step in our making our pulled pork. And remember, what we did is we took our pork butt and then we injected it with a brine, and we stored it overnight in the refrigerator so it had a chance to marinate. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and put together a little rub before we go and do the braising process. So what I did is I have 7 different things here. First of all, brown sugar. And what this is going to equal, all these different spices, is going to equal the same amount as the brown sugar. So then we have salt, and it's about 2 teaspoons. This is probably about half a cup, but I'll have the recipe down for you, that way you won't have to guess. And then we have a little bit of ground oregano and garlic powder. We have smoked paprika, coarse black pepper, and then some chili powder. And all we're going to do is mix all that up. This, just get it nice and mixed up. And we'll get all these out of the way. And then we're going to go ahead and take our put it out of the bag. Right. And we're just going to give it a good little coating. Top before we braise it. I've got the oven preheating to 325 right now, and let's do a little more, get it all good and covered. And we got these little pieces here as well. And I actually did 2 of these pork butts. I do have another one that we're going to put in. We're going to be using it for a lot of different things, so I'm making a big batch. They're about 6 pounds each. And here we go. All right, that's it. Let's go to the next process. Okay, so now we're going to sear this pork, and I've already got this pan pretty darn hot. So we're going to put the 2 pieces that I did, put them in there. And you can put these small pieces in there as well. There you go. And now we're going to leave these in here for just a little bit. We want to get it really nice and caramelized. And just take a few minutes. And what we're going to do is we're going to take these and we're going to get every single side, all 6 sides nice and brown before we go to the next step. Okay, so we're finished braising this right now. We're going to be, or searing it, I'm sorry. But I don't know if you can see how gold that is. One of these days they're going to invent the smell video so you can actually smell how beautiful that all these herbs and spices smell. But we got it nice and caramelized on the outside. And one of the great things about this dish is when you're done, you should only have the one pan that you're pulling out of the oven, and everything else should be clean. Now that's not like I've always done that, but most of my life I've been in the kitchen where I've had staff to clean up after me, and I typically go from one thing to another, and then I turn around and everything's completely finished and clean for me. But since I've been cooking at home, there's a giant pile of dishes and pots and pans and everything left over. So, my wife says, honey, why don't you just clean up after yourself while you're going through? This will be a lot easier. And I said, as normal, she's usually right. So, I'm going to put some onions in here, coarse cut, and we're just going to brown them off a little bit. There we go. Take a couple minutes. All right, so now we have the onions that have been nicely caramelized. That's what it looks like. All right, got that juice in there. And now we're going to do is deglaze the pan. We're going to get white wine. You can use beer if you want, actually. A dark beer works really well. But since I don't have dark beer, we're going to use wine in this dish. So, that in there. And let's scrape all the bits out from the bottom. Make sure we get all that so nothing sticks. There we go. All right. And then, chicken stock. So a pint of each. All we're trying to do is get the pork butt just a little bit of moisture. We don't want it to boil. There we go. I'm gonna set that in there. And I'm gonna put that piece here. And now, put those guys in there. There we go. Now, I'm gonna have some garlic here. And we're just going to throw the garlic on top. We're going to cover it nice and tight. This one. And there you go. By the way, the pan's hot. So be careful with that. All right, now we're going to go ahead and pop it in the oven. And leave it in there for probably around, it's about an hour for every 2 pounds. And these are 6-pound pieces. So you're probably, talking about 3 hours at least. We're probably going to leave it in there for 4 hours because I like, a little slower and lower temperature. So what we're going to do is 325. And after it gets, the internal temperature of the pork gets a little higher, then we're going to turn it way down to 225. And then let's finish off the rest of the cooking time, okay? And then we'll see you on the other side.